Sign over the property documents to Julian's trust right now, or the authorities will claim the residence this Friday. My stepmother, Elena, smacked a final seizure warning down on the coffee table just as I was still wearing my funeral jacket. She directed my attention to an unfamiliar man positioned near the window. "This is Julian. He is your father's hidden child. And he's the sole immediate cash purchaser ready to settle the outstanding balance to preserve the family's reputation. Leave a comment below sharing where you're tuning in from, and tell me the current time and your location. I'd really appreciate knowing who's joining our group." I lifted the tax document. My fingers stayed steady. Freaking out wasn't an option I could indulge in. Not while facing someone as ruthless as Elena. As someone who works in forensic genealogy, my days are filled examining official records, birth documents, and population data. I recognize the authentic feel of government paperwork. I understand the distinct, substantial feel that comes with true administrative power. Yet this document felt off. It had the feel of ordinary copy paper, far too thin and glossy. The typeface appeared slightly too contemporary. An Arial variant rather than the typical official serif font found on tax claims from 3 years back. The difference was minor. The sort of detail most mourning children would overlook amid emotional turmoil. But for me, it shouted fake. This wasn't a genuine monetary disaster. It was an engineered emergency meant to push through a hurried transaction before anyone could examine the finances. Still, I kept silent. Calling her out immediately would only make her shift tactics. She'd accuse me of being heartless. That I valued minor details over my father's supposed last desire to support his child. She'd twist my reasoning into evidence of my lack of compassion. So I followed the script she'd prepared. I allowed my posture to droop. I made my tone waver just sufficiently to seem shattered. I raised my gaze toward her. Tears gathering but refusing to spill, I questioned why Dad never mentioned this obligation. Elena exhaled, the noise carefully practiced. She explained he was excessively prideful. That he'd insisted she conceal it to safeguard his self-respect. It was emotional blackmail. She was using my father's image as leverage to justify the deception. I drew in an unsteady inhale. I explained I couldn't handle it right now. I pleaded for 7 days. Only 7 days to bid farewell to the residence and gather my belongings. After that, I'd approve anything she desired. I caught the victorious gleam in her gaze, keen and eager. She believed the phony tax warning had frightened me into yielding. She assumed victory was hers. "Very well," she replied, her grin constrained. 1 week. But absolutely no extra time. I exited the space with my head lowered, appearing thoroughly beaten. Yet as soon as those solid oak doors shut behind me, my thoughts shifted modes. Grief had ended. Investigation had begun. That evening, the property felt oppressively still. I wandered the corridors by myself. The wooden planks groaning beneath my steps in a cadence familiar since early childhood. The quiet carried weight. Packed with the echoes of a life Elena was determined to remove. I paused at the entrance to the old nursery. The coating was flaking a bit low down. Yet the past remained intact. I traced my fingertips across the carved indentations in the timber. My father had recorded my growth there each year until I headed to university. Tiny, uneven horizontal scores accompanied by dates in his loose, untidy script. Celeste, age 5. Celeste, age 10. Celeste, age 18. Those marks served as the sole tangible evidence that I'd once belonged here as a youngster. That affection had existed prior to Elena's entrance. To outsiders, this place was merely property, a collection of materials and acreage valued at $3.5 million. But for me, it functioned as a gallery. It served as a repository. It remained the single location on the planet still safeguarding recollections of my birth mother. Elena wasn't simply after selling real estate. She aimed to cash out an entire heritage. She planned to convert these sentiments into liquid funds to support a fresh existence alongside her concealed offspring. She intended to scrape away those entrance markings, cover the evidence, and wipe out any trace that I'd ever been part of this household. The understanding struck deeper than sorrow. This went beyond stealing. It amounted to rewriting the past. I remained in the shadowed corridor, palms pressed against the notch from my 10th year, and I pledged to the residents directly. I'm not battling over possessions. I'm resisting the elimination of my father's heritage. And I refuse to allow its seizure. I skipped my father's office. Elena would have cleansed that space initially, destroying any damaging material. Instead, I climbed to the loft. It was sweltering, grimy, and crammed with items long forgotten. This was the true storage of history. I devoted hours sifting through containers of old tax filings from the 90s, disregarding the insects and warmth. I searched for inconsistencies, irregularities, anything contradicting the presented tale. And eventually, I uncovered something. A fragment. A container holding voided personal checks dated 1995. My father kept impeccable documentation. I scanned them until a group caught my attention: payments directed to a particular medical facility in a distant countryside area. The note simply stated, "Medical costs, Elena." This made no sense. Elena insisted their first meeting occurred in 2005. Why would he cover her hospital fees a decade prior? And why from a location 3 hours distant? Digging further into the adjacent letters container, I uncovered the response to a long-standing mystery. Why had Dad ceased contact? I discovered correspondence from his former bookkeeper, still sealed. Messages from acquaintances, diverted. And unfinished drafts from him to me, expressing hurt that I'd stopped responding. The isolation scheme. I rested on the dirty planks, grasping the extent of her scheme. Elena hadn't merely taken funds. She'd hijacked his perception. She'd diverted correspondence, screened communications, and supplied constant falsehoods that his loved ones had deserted him, leaving only her. She'd constructed an environment where she alone provided rescue, rendering him reliant on her for all things, including facts. That explained his approval of those payments. She hadn't merely imitated his signature. She'd fabricated his agreement. I photographed the 1995 payments. Then, leveraging my expert access, I retrieved official records. I requested expedited duplicates of birth entries from that isolated region for the matching period. While awaiting delivery, I focused on the pressing danger. The claimed tax claim. I phoned the local tax office personally. The staff member sounded disinterested until I provided the property identifier. She verified the estate's taxes were current. No claim existed. No confiscation warning. I expressed gratitude and ended the call. A chilly grin formed. The document was entirely fabricated. Next, I investigated Heritage Restoration LLC, supposedly receiving $1.2 million from my father across 5 years. Elena described it as vital structural and roofing fixes. Yet visible deterioration, flaking coats and moisture marks, told otherwise. No improvements occurred. I obtained the company's public registration details. The authorized representative wasn't any builder. It was Julian. The location was merely a mailbox at a small commercial center. This wasn't parental support. It wasn't maintenance. It was outright misappropriation. Straightforward theft. Across 5 years, Elena had siphoned my father's resources, channeling funds to her child via phony billing for non-existent services. And she'd persuaded him to authorize the transactions. The delivery service brought an official package 2 days afterward. My palms turned icy as I unsealed it. It contained the detailed birth record from that countryside district. I reviewed the file. My attention fixed on the entries. Mother, Elena Vance. Father, unknown. Birthdate, November 12, 1995. The child's name differed from Julian. Yet the timing aligned precisely with the payments. Julian wasn't Charles's offspring. He was Elena's child from an adolescent pregnancy she'd concealed entirely. She hadn't introduced him to reunite with a parent. She'd presented him to extract the remaining wealth. The paternity exam displayed at the service was mere theater. The narrative of my father's final request was fiction. This had evolved beyond a succession conflict. It constituted major theft and deceit. I assembled the evidence file. The birth record, the bogus tax warning, the company registrations, the voided checks. I organized them carefully. The snare was prepared. The deadline arrived. Elena acted swiftly. She organized an extravagant remembrance event at the property. She labeled it a homage to my father. But all present understood its true purpose. A celebratory display. A formal transfer event. The sweeping entrance hosted numerous high-end vehicles. Attorneys, associates, and the ready purchaser. A technology executive linked to Julian hovered among them. Moving like predators in formal attire. Bubbly poured freely. The atmosphere carried the scent of costly flowers in expectation. Elena positioned herself on an elevated stage in the grand hall, embodying the sorrowful yet dignified widow. She delivered an emotional address about preserving family dignity. About tough decisions needed to resolve my father's concealed obligations. The audience absorbed it eagerly. Then, she motioned toward me. She declared I would execute the title shift, fulfilling my father's supposed dying instruction to provide for his child. She extended the writing instrument and the sound device. The space hushed. Every gaze fixed on me. I ascended the platform. I grasped the audio device in one hand and the substantial ink pen in the other. I surveyed the gathering. Then the purchaser. And lastly Elena. Her stare was intense. Challenging me to create drama. I stated I was prepared to proceed. My tone projected clearly and firmly. However, since no testament exists, I noted. The title guarantee firm demands we resolve heirship formally. I retrieved a form from my jacket interior. It was a routine heirship declaration. I positioned it beside the transfer document on the stand. I addressed Elena and Julian. I informed them they needed to affirm under oath, facing perjury consequences, that Julian was Charles's biological child to claim the funds. Merely a routine step for the insurer's satisfaction. The notary I'd arranged confirmed with a nod nearby. Elena paused briefly. She glanced toward Julian, then the attendees. Then toward the purchaser holding the $3.5 million payment. Avarice clouds judgment powerfully. She lifted the instrument. She endorsed it. Then passed it to Julian. He added his signature dramatically. The notary applied the seal with a firm, conclusive sound. The mechanism locked. They'd just performed a criminal act in official form. Immediately after the seal struck, I indicated to the audiovisual operator. The display on the large projection behind us shifted. My father's memorial image disappeared. Replacing it, a clear digital copy of paperwork. It showed the detailed birth record. Elena Vance illuminated prominently beside mother. The father section remained empty. The birth occurred in 1995. Murmurs of bewilderment spread through the attendees. The display advanced once more. Genuine tax status appeared. Balance 0. Followed by fabricated billing from Heritage Restoration LLC juxtaposed against Julian's registration. I returned to the audio device. You didn't discover a child, Elena. I declared. My words sliced through the whispers sharply. You recruited your own offspring to plunder my father. I outlined the scheme methodically, item by item. The phony improvements. The fabricated tax warning. The prolonged misappropriation. I observed her complexion fade. She appeared to age rapidly in moments. She reached for the device, but I moved aside. You sought a heritage, I addressed the quiet assembly. This is it. The officers, positioned discreetly awaiting the perjury indication, advanced. Restraints secured around Elena's wrists initially. Then Julian's. Megan, my step-sibling, remained motionless among the guests, witnessing her prospects dissolve. Attendees stood speechless, appalled. This had ceased being a celebration. It had become an investigation scene. The emergency sounds receded gradually. The remaining visitors and the deceptive purchaser departed hastily, anxious to separate from the controversy. I lingered solo in the hall's middle, then proceeded to my father's office. The residence felt calm. Thick drapes blocked the exterior turmoil. I poured a measure of his preferred red vintage. I settled into his armchair. The leather still emitting the familiar creak from my youth. For the first occasion in months, the atmosphere felt light. The property remained secure. The past endured. The harmful element had been removed. Elena confronted a decade behind bars for deceit, misappropriation, and false swearing. Julian faced detention. And Megan? My step-sibling lingered in the entranceway as law enforcement vehicles departed. Financially ruined and disgraced. Comprehending her easy lifestyle had collided with reality. I savored a sip of the vintage. It carried the flavor of fairness. I glanced across the space. Poured the volumes. The antique charts. The ancestral images Elena had attempted to dispose of. I felt no isolation. I was encircled by those who truly counted. I had transcended being merely a child. I had become the guardian of my existence. I lifted the glass toward the vacant area, glimpsing my image in the shadowed pane. To honesty, I murmured. And to the residents preserving it. If you've ever stood solitary to defend what holds value, share your experience below. You remain the guardian of your own reality. Wow. Inhale slowly. I understand precisely what you're yelling at your display. You're likely wondering, why delay an entire week? Why act compliant at all? Why not expose them instantly upon spotting the phony warning? Judging from afar comes easily. But let's analyze the mental dynamics involved. Celeste wasn't displaying weakness. She was escaping a dependency. Psychologists term this the slot machine phenomenon, or variable reward pattern. Consider slot machine mechanics. You activate it repeatedly, usually receiving nothing. Occasionally, however, it dispenses small winnings. Sufficient to maintain engagement, anticipating the big reward. Toxic households operate identically. Elena didn't torment Celeste constantly. She offered occasional glimpses of kindness, a grin occasionally, a shared meal now and then, just adequate to sustain Celeste's pursuit of familial harmony. Celeste wasn't foolish for lingering. She'd been trained to anticipate affection that would never arrive. Yet this marks the turning point. And here's the practical wisdom to carry forward. Celeste ceased participating in their scheme and shifted to monetary protection. Did you notice her initial clever action? It wasn't confrontation. It was the examination approach. Deceivers and controllers depend on emotional upheaval. They aim for panic to prevent scrutiny of specifics. Elena thrust that warning forward to intimidate Celeste. But Celeste examined the material's quality. She inspected the lettering, she contacted the tax authority. When you halt emotional response and initiate verification, control returns. Manipulators despise precision because truth resides in precision. Next, she focused on constructing proof. Observe that she avoided immediate accusation with the bogus document. Had she done so, Elena would have invented fresh falsehoods. Instead, Celeste headed to the storage area. She located the 1995 payments. She secured the birth record. She created an evidence collection so comprehensive no manipulation could dismantle it. She collected documentation quietly to unleash impact strategically. And ultimately, the brilliant tactic. The sworn statement snare. This represents peak financial protection. Celeste recognized their greed. She understood they'd endorse anything for $3.5 million. Thus, she exploited their avarice to bind them legally. She compelled them to declare falsely under oath. She didn't merely expose deception. She enabled them to perpetrate a crime officially. She avoided debate. She permitted justice to handle the burden. So, the conclusion? You serve as the steward of your existence. Exactly as Celeste declared. You needn't await non-existent remorse. You needn't purchase escape from harmful bonds. When something feels incorrect, if the warning seems counterfeit or family allegiance proves costly, believe your instinct. Examine the connection. Verify the evidence. And when necessary, permit the harmful element to eliminate itself. If this narrative struck a chord, or you've ever scrutinized your own circumstances to uncover reality, press subscribe. We're forming a network of resilient individuals. Until our next discussion, remain vigilant and safeguard your evidence.
Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that bell icon so you never miss a twist. Stay tuned to Reddit Tales Times for your daily dose of drama, laughs, and unbelievable stories.